Hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Wait for a few people to get on today. Now, I was going to talk about, I think I said Monday that I was talking about code switching today. And I'm still going to do that, but not today. So I have decided, I was talking to a client yesterday, and it occurred for me that it was a good day to talk about what happens when we hold on to pain and resentment, right? And this question has come up a lot in the last few days or the last week or so for me. And so that's one of the reasons why it was on my mind to share about it. Because when I'm hearing a theme, I'm talking about things and I'm hearing a theme, I take notice. I take notice. What is resentment? You know, resentment is essentially holding on to anger or negative emotion or hurt, right? Mostly it's anger, and it's basically holding on to negative emotion toward a situation or another person. And when we hold on to resentment, who's really doing the suffering? So that's what I really wanted to talk a little bit about today. So I was talking with a client, and we were doing some of our deep work. And inside of that deep work, she was letting go of some hurt. And it was hurt that had happened between her and a close family member of hers. And so, you know, it was a very emotional space that she was in. And one of the things that came up is that she didn't really want to let go of that hurt. And what was said was that she wanted to see this person. She didn't feel like this person had suffered enough. She wanted to see this person suffer, in a sense, right? And so, you know, the question I asked, there were a couple of questions that I asked. But the first thing I said, and I always say, is that holding on to resentment is like taking poison and expecting someone else to die. All right. And so who really suffers when we hold on to resentment is who? The person holding on to the resentment. Because, you know, the object of that resentment is they may have gotten past it. They may even be themselves suffering on their own. But the problem is when you hold on to that resentment, it's eating away at you constantly. It's eating away at you constantly. So that is why forgiveness. Now, I just want to distinguish some things about forgiveness, because this is a conversation I had with my client. Sometimes when we think about forgiveness, some people think about forgiveness as letting people off the hook, or some people think that by forgiving a person, they're saying that what they did was okay, or that what they did was right. And we want to start to tease away what forgiveness really is. Really, forgiveness is releasing that negative emotion. Forgiveness is for the person actually doing the forgiveness, or forgiving. It's releasing the negative emotion associated with the event that happened with that person or associated with that person, so that the person can be free. The person, because let's just face it, some people who commit an act, either they don't even know that they've done it, or they've done it and they've gotten over it, or, you know, maybe they're torturing themselves and need to forgive themselves. We don't know. There's no way to know this information. And so we have to understand that it is more beneficial to us to let that go. And that it doesn't mean that whatever that person did to you or around you, whatever that person has done, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it valid. It's just you relinquishing the hold that event, that transgression has over you. Because in essence, when we hold on to resentment, the person that you're resenting, or the situation that you're resenting, or the system that you're resenting, that person, place, thing still has power over you, and is you're not at the source of your own well-being when you're holding on to resentment. So when you let go of that resentment through the process of forgiveness, or whatever it is, whatever process that allows you to let go, then it frees you up to be fully expressed and to be well. So the question I have is, who do you have to release resentment around? Who do you have to forgive? And what questions do you have? Right? Because this is not a rocket science. It's not a long, drawn out conversation, but it is a very significant conversation, because so many people are not able to be free because they're not able to let go. So many people are held hostage by their negative emotions, by their resentments. So many people are held hostage by those negative emotions, by circumstances, by situations, right? So the question is, what is it that you need to let go of? And what is it going to take for you to set yourself free? The other question I ask my client is, well, how much time is appropriate for one to suffer, right? Because sometimes we imagine that they're not suffering, or we imagine they haven't suffered enough. But really, what is the appropriate amount of time for one to suffer? Is it for the rest of their lives? Is it until they die? Is it until January 1st of 2022? I don't know. What is it? So you want to ask yourself that question of, I guess, depending on what the person, place, or the system is, right? When is it appropriate for you to let go, or for them to stop suffering? Yeah. And if the shoe were on that foot, what would be appropriate for you to stop suffering? When would be the appropriate time for you to stop suffering? And that's really the question that you ask right now. If you are holding on to any negative emotions, when is the appropriate time for you to stop suffering? Ask yourself that question. Because the truth of the matter is that if you choose to, when you choose to, you can let go at any given time. You can let go right now. You can choose to let go the moment you go to sleep tonight, the moment that your head lays down on the pillow. If you're willing to let go of that resentment, of that negative emotion, then you can. And some people do need a little bit more work with a professional, right? With someone who can help them to access the unconscious or the subconscious, or whatever it is that they need to do to let go, to work through specific traumas, especially big traumas. And at the same time, one has to be willing to let go. And I always ask when I'm working with my clients, is it okay with the unconscious mind that you let go of the negative emotion or the limiting belief or decision? And you really have to ask your unconscious mind that. And you guys know I work a lot with the unconscious mind. So it's important that you allow yourself to connect with that subconscious and ask your subconscious if it's okay. If it's not okay, then you really have to ask yourself, how much longer am I willing to suffer for someone else's transgressions? Yeah. Yes. And you're right, Dr. Lynette. Forgiveness is a choice, and it can be difficult. And I think the part that helps with the difficulty is understanding that forgiveness does not mean that what the other person did was necessarily right. That it doesn't validate another person's actions or transgressions. One of the assumptions that we have in neurolinguistic programming is that everyone is doing the best they can with the resources that they have available, right? Everyone is doing the best they can with the resources they have available. So in some cases, a person has a limited access to what they see in their view, in their model of the world, what choices are available to them. So whereas, some people who have been trained and developed or been steeped in personal development work or spirituality or whatever that thing is, or who have done a lot of introspection, may have access to the internal and personal resources There are others who have not yet gotten there. And so they're operating from their limited view and their limited amount of choices at that time, their limited amount of internal resources at that time. And it may not be until later that they develop those resources. You know, I grew up in a household where I had a parent who, or a step parent who was abusive. And, you know, to forgive him for being abusive to my mother, I had to really understand that he was dealing with whatever he was dealing with. And I later found out that he was he was a vet suffering from PTSD, and, you know, there was definitely substance abuse involved, and, you know, stuff that I wouldn't have understood as a child. Not that it made what he did right, but it gave me an understanding of what he was dealing with and the resources that he had available to him at that time. And while he has become, you know, sort of a different person, he's developed more resources within himself. It still doesn't let him off the hook necessarily for what he did. And he understands that. Not only does he understand that, he asks for forgiveness for that, right? So some people will do that. And then we have to decide for within ourselves if we're going to forgive, which frees us, not necessarily excusing the behavior. Does that make sense? So, if as you're moving towards forgiveness, as you're becoming willing to forgive and let go of resentment, one thing that may help is to, remember that person, even a system, right? And the system is made up of individuals. So we got to understand that too, right? So there's the system. There's a lot of people who hold resentments towards systems. And I can tell you for myself, I was actually on a call this morning with a client, a physician client, and she was sharing with me some of the limitations of being able to manage her time. And I was very clear that this was a systemic problem in the physician community, and it's why I left medicine. It's why I started coaching mom docs a few years ago through burnout. It's why I've helped docs to create new careers that allow them to have more time, freedom, and fulfillment. And it's why I transitioned to neurolinguistic programming and helping them get rid of the deep trauma that has really ensued inside of our community. But I was feeling, what was coming up for me was this emotion of anger and frustration toward the system, right? And then I just had to really get, you know, the system is made up of people who have a particular set of resources and intentions. And in order to save myself some suffering, I need to focus on, yes, it is definitely real. In order to save myself some mental anguish, I need to understand that with the resources that those individuals running the system have, they are doing the best they can. And I can choose to hold on to that belief and allow that belief to run the show rather than the resentment to run the show. And that's a more empowering belief. And then I can focus on my client and helping her to steal that time back and make the hard choices that she may have to make around taking care of herself. So I think I've covered pretty much everything I need to cover. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's come on today. And just to remind you that, you know, we do lives on Mondays and Thursdays. And of course, if you want to join me on other platforms, like the live audio platform, I'm still at Dr. Maisha. If you are interested in learning some of the tools, thanks, Wes. If you are interested in learning some of the tools of neurolinguistic programming and maybe want to join one of our next classes, you can hit me up right in my inbox, or you can go to the link in my bio And that will tell you about the upcoming programs. I think we have another training coming up at the end of April, and then we'll have one this summer as well. And they're virtual right now, of course, because of the pandemic. Eventually we'll have them live, and maybe some of you will get to meet me in person. I always love meeting people that I form relationships online, in person eventually. So you can hit the link in the bio. You can go to remapmymind.com. And if you feel like you need some of this deep personal work, if you're holding on to resentment, if you're having some problems or trouble or challenges forgiving someone, and you know it's because there's maybe a bigger trauma that you're dealing with. Sometimes we can't forgive someone in the present because of a trauma that happened in the past that triggers the present response. And so if that's the case, and it triggers a certain conversation even about ourselves, right? And so sometimes when we're having trouble forgiving ourselves or forgiving someone else, it's a function of a conversation or a triggered response in the past. And so if you're having that kind of trouble forgiving, you're having that kind of reaction, that deeper emotional reaction, that may be the time to reach out and do some deep personal work. You know, I'm always talking about doing deep personal work, and I think it's so important because, in our lives every day, we're kind of on the go. We're go, and we're keeping it moving. And I think I talked a little bit about this last time. We're keeping it moving. We're always just, to the next thing, and we never stop to consider what the experience is that we're having in our bodies. And it's important that we make that consideration, because at the end of the day, the way we think will impact the way our body functions. And that's why there's so much, research that's going on in the mind-body connection field. And that's why neurolinguistic programming is becoming more and more popular. It's becoming more and more recognized, is because there is that link to the mind and the body, right? So reach out to me if you want some deep personal work. If you are having trouble, getting rid of some limiting beliefs, getting rid of the deep-seated emotions, forgiving someone else, reach out to me via my link, or also in my inbox. And we will see you next week. Next week, what are we talking about? I think we're talking a little bit more about defense mechanisms. I don't know if you noticed, but I tend to go on themes. So the theme has been defense mechanisms, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about defense mechanisms next week and what they represent. So stay tuned. We'll see you next week. Have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. Y'all take care. And I'll download this to IG. So for those of you who want to forward it on or share it with someone else, you may do that. And please leave your comments and questions. I always monitor them.